Hello there, welcome back to the Health and Safety Digest, a special podcast by Astutis. And we're so happy to be back. I am your host, Toby Howell, the digital content writer at Astutis. And as ever, as you have heard many a time, I am your guide through this special voyage of health, safety, and environmental training. We are so delighted to be back with this special one-off episode looking into our account management services, especially our workplace training, our customized courses, and our consultancy services here at Astutis, all empowered to help your business grow and improve your workforce. We talk today to David Beer, who's been with us for many a year on our account management team, and he will take us through numerous examples where he worked with companies, learners, clients around the world to help improve their business, one member of their workforce at a time. So without further ado, let's get into our chat with Dave. Mr. David Beer, you join us today having been with Astutis for just over 4 years, but you have well over 10 years of account managing experience. There is no one better to help lift the veil and inform our listeners about our account-based family members here at Astutis. So without further ado, Mr. David Beer, welcome to the Health and Safety Digest.
What an introduction, Toby. I'm blown away. Where you said there's no one better placed. I'm sure some of my colleagues who work within the account management team might beg to differ, but I'll certainly do my best here to answer your questions and perhaps just give you a flavour of what it is that we do here within the account management team at Astutis and how we support our clients.
That's perfect. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us today, Dave. The first question I would like to ask you today is if you could just, in your own words, describe your role here at Astutis.
Okay, great question. And I suppose looking at it, it would be the viewpoint from which we look at it. Now, are we looking at things pre-pandemic or post-pandemic? And that's important in that pre-pandemic, my role is field-based and I've got a nationwide remit. So I would routinely be traveling, so doing a fair bit of mileage every week, traveling to meet with clients to discuss their requirements and help them with their training and consultancy requirements. And that could be clients who are London-based or clients that might be based in the Lake District. So a lot of variety and a lot of travel, a lot of client meetings, so face-to-face meetings. And of course, the pandemic hit and everything changed. The world changed as we know it. So now, instead of driving a car, I drive a desk. So I find myself very much office-based. We're not undertaking face-to-face client meetings. We can if legislation allows, but I think not just the marketplace, but the world has changed now, and I don't personally see things ever reverting back to the way they were pre-pandemic, and that's kind of borne out really if you look at our virtual training courses. So our Microsoft Teams tutor-led courses, where courses are hosted live on pre-arranged dates and deliveries undertaken via our or via screen sharing technology such as Teams. Now, when you kind of look at that and the benefits that brings to both the client organization, but also the individual delegates, there's so many advantages, if you will, to virtual training that it's sure to stay. And I think I'm right in saying around 70% of all of our training now is being delivered digitally, so either via virtual Microsoft Teams training or via our online e-learning solution. And if we kind of just focus on the virtual training, but from a cost perspective, which is obviously very important given the current economic climate, and I kind of quote some of the mainstream media press in the year of the squeeze that 2022 seems to be representing for us all. But there's significant cost savings to be had, both from our perspective. If we send a tutor to site, then their reasonable travel expenses are rechargeable to the client. Now, we typically wrap that up in the day rate that is applied to our training courses. But if training is delivered virtually, it represents a cost saving just in relation to those tutor expenses.
Exactly.
But if you kind of consider actually from the client and the learner's perspective, then that our average class size might be 10 to 12 delegates. Now, often that will facilitate delegates traveling from other geographic areas around the country to a central location to sit in a classroom course. So that can often bring about travel costs and potentially accommodation charges for delegates to travel to attend a face-to-face training session. It's also a lot more convenient because it negates the need to sit in traffic, stressing, whether you're going to be late on time for a venue if you hit some traffic. And in that respect, that's just a couple of the benefits that virtual training brings. It's a lot more flexible and it's cheaper, but also given, the kind of pandemic landscape, the client has the assurance that training will go ahead as planned on the pre-scheduled dates.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned, if I could just cut in, sorry, it's very
Yeah,
interesting that you mentioned that, because as of the day of recording, yesterday we released our very first report, our academic report into health and safety training and the status of it. We conducted it last year in the latter stages of 2021.
Right.
And we found that even with the complications of the COVID-19 pandemic, training, health and safety training was trending towards virtual and online platforms prior to the pandemic. So attitudes were bending towards it.
Great point, actually, Toby, because I think that we were really well positioned at Astutis when the pandemic hit. So back in, what was it, March 2020. So after the initial kind of panic about courses grinding to a halt, and everybody kind of trying to work out what is it that we're dealing with. Well, actually, we'd already been delivering virtual training to our international clients, so clients based in the US, for example. So we were already well placed. We had that pedigree underpinning our operations, so that allowed us to pivot really quickly to a virtual first model. And I just quickly elaborate on what a virtual first training model is.
Please.
It's essentially we have optimized our kind of course information, our course materials to be delivered virtually via Microsoft Teams. So with classroom training, there will always be a place for it, and of course we support that. But as a business, we've moved to kind of work to make sure that our virtual training is really first class. So we've invested significantly in technology, both the IT and the audio equipment. We've kind of decked out some of our internal training rooms to be recording studios. So we're trying to elevate our courses above that of, well, frankly, the competition, and that's that kind of that pedigree that we had initially really allowed us to kind of move very kind of quickly. And I think that helps as well being an SME. We've got about 60, 65 staff nowadays. And in that respect, given that we are we're the leading provider of NEBOSH training globally, that's really punching above our weight as an SME. And that's something that really is a real kind of credit to Astutis and the Astutis team, the Astutis family, how we've really, got such a significant market share and, of course, such an excellent reputation for quality in the industry. I'll have to check out the report that you referenced. I've not had sight of it yet, so I'm sure that'll make, I look out for that with keen interest. I'm sure it'll make interesting reading. But I'm conscious, Toby, you see, you've got me talking and, and away I go. But I'm going to try and stay on point. So you initially asked me, what is my role in this? So just to kind of go all the way back and to loop us back to where we started, but really it's a role of facilitation. So it's account, contract, relationship management. So I'm not a health and safety practitioner or an environmental practitioner myself. I'm a project manager. So really I look to, so I don't do the doing, if that makes sense. I make things happen. And the buck stops with me, so I have commercial responsibility for the client and for the course that is going ahead. So my kind of role really is just to pull it all together, to be that link, almost like that conduit between client and service provider. So looking to, in the very best of worlds, to embed myself within the client's kind of operation, within their learning and development team or their HR function, and being that trusted advisor, that trusted point of contact. And if problems brought to my door, whatever that guise that might take, then the onus is upon me then to help remove blockages and to smooth waters if necessary. But yeah, it's a very all-encompassing role in that respect. A saying that comes to mind, Toby: all roads lead to Rome. So everything and everything to everyone. But that's the nature of the role. But as I said, there is that marked difference between pre and post pandemic, whereas all that previous travel has been stripped away, and that's been a terrific thing in terms of, from a customer experience perspective, because sure, you've lost that face-to-face interaction, but I think Teams is Teams is a really great alternative, but it's bought me back a lot of time, so a lot of desk time where I'm not just driving hundreds of miles around the country. I'm actually able to utilize that time to better effect. And of course, it's significantly more environmentally friendly.
You've just stolen my line, Dave.
Took
I think
the
I was about
words
to
out
say
of your
that.
mouth.
Yeah,
There you go.
I know from where I am that the company is doing a huge upsurge in environmental responsibility and in its practice. We're cutting down paper usage. Our virtual first strategy is trying to emphasize obviously more online e-learning, virtual learning, which cuts out, as you said earlier on, car journeys, and attending exams in person in some respects. So I
Absolutely.
think you are, yes, you said it nail on the head, which leads directly into my next question.
Okay.
Could you take us through your typical day at Astutis post pandemic?
Post-pandemic. Wow. Okay.
Without the car, but of course you're not driving the car anymore. You're driving the desk.
Indeed, absolutely, driving the desk. And okay, a typical day. It's a varied day. You're never quite sure what the day might bring, but for me, that's a good thing. It's I like the kind of varied nature of the role. But from a typical day, it's a case of being available to support our clients. So via phone, via so client meetings, so review meetings, which are arranged and delivered virtually via Teams. But I will spend a lot of my day really going back to the whole facilitation piece. So it's an organization, making sure that there are balances and checks on existing courses, that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and everything is proceeding as planned. That essentially no stone is left unturned in terms of proper preparation. So proper preparation, as the saying goes, provides great performance. Words to that effect. So it's my role to ensure that everything's in place, everything that we need to ensure a successful course, that the tutor is on point if there are any special considerations. And aside from those checks and balances on existing courses, it's a case of looking at future courses. So it's assisting our clients with online training, virtual training, or in company delivered classroom training. And it's not rocket science, but when a client wishes to run a course, if we just say a client wishes to run an IOSH Managing Safely training course, it's a 3-day training course. If they wanted that delivered on site, then we would obviously need to agree specific dates of training delivery. I would need to draft for them a formal document, a proposal of service, which sounds all rather grand, but essentially it's a formal quote. So to make sure that everything's quoted correctly, and then that the order is confirmed correctly, and have all that processed. It's then the kind of finer arrangements. So what time the training is going to start, how many delegates are we expecting? For virtual courses, we need to capture certain data sets from delegates' information to set the courses up. And likewise for in-company training, we need to make sure, if applicable, examinations are registered with the relevant accrediting body, IOSH and EBOSH, whatever that might be. Now, we will send and dispatch to site prior to the delivery of the course hard copy course notes or hard copy course materials. So we need to know how many we're sending, where they're going, who they should be marked for the attention of, etc. So it's that belt and braces approach to ensuring that actually, going back to what I was saying about the I's being dotted and the T's being crossed, then actually the fundamentals are in place to ensure an excellent training intervention. And in a nutshell, without perhaps delving into really kind of finite detail, that's a whistle-stop tour of what a day looks like. It's working with our clients to make sure that the training that we have in place, regardless of training medium, is going well, and it's assisting our clients with arranging future courses. And of course then, whilst simultaneously managing the commercial relationship with the client at hand. Have I done that justice for you there, Toby?
Well, I was just about to say, Dave, you have done more than justice. You're the very coalface, the engine of Astutis, the very coalface at the frontier of what we do here. So we have to applaud you. But that really does lead into my next question.
Okay.
It might seem an obvious one, but from your opinion, when you're talking to our clients, why is it so important that we have a healthy, strong, meaningful relationship with our clients? You know, why for you is that so important?
Okay. Principally, it's good business, Toby, and you know, from Astutis' perspective, you know, we are in the business of being the premium supplier of accredited HSE training in the global marketplace, and so we need to back up and to underpin that reputation for the quality of our service provision. So trust is very important. And I'll give you an example. You mentioned at the outset of the call, I've been with Astutis now for 4 years, and then I've been working in an account management capacity for around 10 years. That's actually within the kind of HSE arena, if you will. So prior to that, I was kind of working similar roles, but in financial services, for example. So I've always had that kind of, you know, my career to date really has been forged around providing an excellent customer experience to you know, and around contract management, account management, key account management, and new business acquisition. And from my perspective, I've used that example. So I started kind of working with some clients 10 years ago at the company I represented at the time. And you know, all these years later, a decade later, I'm still working with some of those same clients. And things change, people move on, people retire, you know, all that good stuff. So, you know, those relationships don't necessarily always endure such a long time frame. But really, it's a case of that that kind of personal reputation comes firmly into the equation. You know, so it's both an Astutis reputation and a personal reputation. And the Astutis brand values and corporate reputation is very much aligned to my own belief system. So, you know, you don't necessarily win a client for a project at hand. You know, if you do well in terms of your service offering, you fulfill your obligations, and you meet your promises, then actually that translates into a good practice from a business perspective, because repeat business from an existing client is so much easier to kind of attain, as opposed to trying to, you know, break into, you know, brand new clients and to work with them. You've got none of that past history, none of that past experience from the clients in terms of their involvement with yourself. So it's vital, it's critical, Toby. You know, relationships are key. And, you know, I take great pride in the fact that, you know, the caliber of clients that I represent. So, you know, my personal kind of account management portfolio here at Astutis includes the likes of, you know, working with a cooperative group and Muller UK and Ireland and Bentley Motors. And, you know, they have high expectations, they have disparate requirements, which are very client specific. And, you know, across the years, your relationships, they kind of, they evolve and they mature, but it's really vital, Toby. It's a critical component to what we do.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, because my next question was going to be in terms of having these relationships for a long time. I know you're not the only person who has these relationships with our clients now for,
No,
you know, some 10, 15 years.
Yes.
And is it as not as simple, but is it as straightforward as ensuring that, of course, the courses that they train for their staff and their workforce are up to scratch, continue the information, the communications up to scratch, but how why is it that Astutis continue to have these really flourishing, continuing long relationships with their clients? What's the secret there?
Okay, so the secret sauce, it's an amalgam of ingredients I'd propose, and you suggested, why is it that our students have got these long and enduring and valued, trusted
Mm,
relationships, and that's principally born out of the quality of the service provision that we provide. But you touched on, not just myself having long-term relationships with our clients, and that's very much the case. So my colleagues within the account management team, Claire, Paul, Mark, Adam, we've all been working with our respective clients to a greater or lesser capacity for a long period of time. And certainly from my perspective, it's very much a case of I position myself as the client's advocate. So
right.
I'm here to work with you to protect your interests and to, as I said, provide that conduit between service provider and client. But from me, from personally, it's a case of being available, being approachable, listening, actively listening. What is the client's requirement? What is the issue at hand? Whatever it might be, the kind of particular scenario. But to fulfill your promises, Toby. So if I say that I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, then I'm going to do
Mm,
exactly what I said I'm going to do. So it's that kind of assurance, and actions speak louder than words. So you don't necessarily kind of speak to a client. If I started to speak to a client we've not supported previously, I'm not going to go into, right, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for you. I'm going to be that kind of point of contact, that kind of person with commercial responsibility. It's more a case of demonstrating through your actions, and that kind of continual high level of support. So I consider myself to be a problem solver and an innovative thinker. So I will look with our clients to derive if necessary, a bespoke solution that is applicable to them. But it's a case of following through. And if for some reason you might promise to get some documentation to a client by X time, and things can and do happen. And if that becomes unachievable for whatever reason, well, it's incumbent upon you then to make sure that there's a very strong level of communication.
mm.
So you pick up the phone, or get in touch. You let them know what there's actually a slight complication. This is the case, whatever it might be, and I'll take care of this. I'll get this sorted out for you.
Right.
It's going to be by X time or Y time, a revised time. So it's that kind of communication piece. So essentially, it's a case of being approachable and available. It's a case of fulfilling your promises, and it's a case of providing an excellent customer experience.
Well, it does sound to me, Dave, that you essentially take up the role of, their representative, and it sounds like you're doing a terrific job, and the way you say it comes across very, very well. My last question, and obviously I appreciate your time today. Um, you know, in terms of tailoring the support for our clients, from what I understand from the way we work with our clients, we can go extremely customized in terms of molding the course not just to the intricacies of a business, but the very fabric of their DNA.
Yes.
But and my question is, do you have a recent example, almost, or even distant, that reflects how we have done that, and showcases, maybe and paints a better picture than us just talking about it on a ground level, in terms of how we do customize our courses to benefit the client?
Yes. I think what it comes down to is that there are there are certain requirements which are, kind of universal across many sectors and industries, and therefore there's a requirement for what we might term off-the-shelf products.
Right.
So, Something like we touched or used IOSH Managing Safely, a 3-day course if delivered in a classroom setting. Personally, I'd advocate serious consideration to the online e-learning variant of the training. It's very strong, it's very powerful, it's very well put together. But there will always be a requirement for kind of a standardized product. So if a client needs an IOSH Managing Safely course delivered regardless, or training delivered regardless of training medium, then that's something that we're readily able to facilitate in quick order, and it follows a standardized process. And everything, all things being equal, everything should run like clockwork. Now, when we kind of start working with our clients then on a very kind of bespoke basis, those requirements are very much specific to the organization at hand. And on that basis, they can vary widely. So a lot of what we will kind of do will be based upon the operations of the client, the work activities that they undertake, and their kind of requirements from a health, safety, or an environment training or consultancy provisioning will therefore be very much aligned to their specific operations. So we'll work with the clients really to kind of really understand the requirement. That's the first port of call.
Right. You can't just rush in.
You cannot, no. You need to, it takes as long as it takes to be able to kind of garner a very strong appreciation of the requirement at hand. So that can often necessitate kind of document exchange, so policies, procedures kind of being relayed, needing to be reviewed and understood in terms of the relevancy of the requirement at hand. But often client meetings, so conversations, often kind of underpinned then and backed up by written confirmation via email. But it's very much a case of not just understanding, what it is, what kind of intervention that the client is looking to deploy, but why, and what is the end game, and what feeds into that. And good kind of health and safety practice in an organization is both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And it's especially if you've worked with a client for a very long period of time and you've really got to get a solid kind of understanding of their operations, that's really kind of vital and really, really key, in terms of your ability to look at the requirement at hand, understand what the requirements are, and then to diligently align appropriate support, an appropriate support solution. So that's for an example, and a couple that come to mind would be some online e-learning training content development that we've recently undertaken. So 2 projects spring to mind, one for St John Ambulance Wales and the other for BSI, so the British Standards Institute. So I supported both organisations with developing very bespoke online content. So to do that, it necessitated significant discussion in the first instance to understand what the client was trying to achieve, what they were seeking and working to achieve, why that was, and what that kind of fed into. So if we look at the BSI example, so one of our online training courses is the IEMA Sustainability Skills Suite. So we offer the sustainability skills for the workforce, and we offer the sustainability skills for the managers course. And BSI had a look at our IEMA sustainability skills for the workforce course. They really liked how we'd put it together, etc. But in terms of their sustainability agenda, they had further requirements. There was content within the course that was not considered necessary. So there was amendments, omissions, and additions and revisions that were required to really kind of take the basis of our course as a template, if you will, and to really build upon that, and to kind of make sure that kind of end product was very much aligned to what BSI were looking to achieve. And the requirement was really quite complex in so much as the final developed course was to be rolled out to circa 5,000 BSI employees worldwide.
Wow.
Before there were language considerations that came into the into the equation. So a requirement to translate or develop content to Chinese, another requirement to kind of work with the client or work with the course to develop a Spanish language variant of the course. And and that was all kind of put together in conjunction with our excellent kind of course development team, which is headed up by Gareth Morgan. And Gareth runs a very tight ship with his development team. He really is brilliant. Gareth is he's probably forgotten more about learning and development than I'll ever learn, but he comes across so very well with the clients. And he really knows his onions. He really knows his stuff. So So from my perspective, I guess what I'm getting at was, Toby, is one, you got to get that understanding of the client's requirements. But then from an Astutis perspective, you've got to act as that overarching project manager to bring in the necessary expertise, the necessary resource to be able to undertake the requirement at hand. And then that kind of necessitates working with our internal teams, then Gareth's team, for an example, in terms of mapping out a roadmap for development, timeframes and milestones as we move forward, etc., all arriving at a defined endpoint where we had committed to deliver the developed course material in SCORM format for the client to allow them to roll that out. And that went brilliantly. And the feedback I actually had from our course sponsor or project sponsor at BSI, Amanda, was that the course was considered excellent. And
fantastic.
That word "excellent" is perhaps sometimes overused or kind of underappreciated. But for an organisation of the calibre of BSI, given their kind of standing, to kind of comment that the developed material that we arrived at was excellent, was more than enough reward for all the effort that went into underpinning the successful completion of the project.
No, and it sounds fantastic, and congratulations with your work with BSI.
Thank you.
Dave, I couldn't have asked any more from you today. You've come in and you've really given us a good show here on the Health and Safety Digest. So I'd like to say thank you very much for answering all the questions, and thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, Toby, it's brilliant, and I must say I kind of came into this with a degree of trepidation, but you've been a brilliant host, Toby, and you've really helped to put me at ease. So I hope I've, as I said earlier, I've done justice and to matters. But and thank you, and I look forward to hearing the podcast, or perhaps I won't. I always seem to sound very Welshy. I always come across very Welshy when sometimes you'll be on the phone to a client and you hear a bit of reverberation, a bit of echoing, a bit of feedback, and so I hear my own voice, and I'm always. I personally don't think I come across sounding that Welsh, but by all accounts I do. So I hope I've come across clearly, and yeah, I've done my best. So thank you, Toby. I'm grateful.
Well, if I hear feedback from our listeners that we need subtitles next time you're on, we'll do it. Dave, thank you very much.
Cheers, Toby. I'm grateful. All the best.
Thank you, David, for that. Now, looking forward to the coming weeks, we will be launching Season 2 of the Health and Safety Digest. This is a bonus episode, but in the coming weeks, we are going to feature exclusive coverage on the NIBOSH national and international versions, the two of them combined, of the General Certificate for Occupational Health and Safety. Now, in the prior season, where we focused on the NIBOSH diploma, we relied on Brennig to use his massive brain of knowledge to help inform us about the diploma. However, we've expanded our interviewee umbrella this time around, and we are featuring interviews with tutors, Brennig himself, our learning development department, someone from our operations department to help understand and lift the veil regarding our customer service and our learner interaction, And then we will also be featuring the likes of you, our wonderful learners, to help us and potential learners understand about the fantastic offering that the General Certificate offers learners around the world. So if you are looking at the General Certificate, be that the national or international version, stay tuned and we will be launching several episodes dedicated solely to answering your most frequently asked questions regarding the qualification, incorporating current learners who can tell you whether the course is for you. Until then, thank you very much for listening. You can follow us and find us on all social media platforms if you just type in Astutis, and you can email me directly at toby.howell@astutis.com for any queries, questions regarding the diploma, the General Certificate, or any other qualifications that you're currently doing. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Speak to you soon.